Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Hello and good morning, and you're very welcome to today's Signpost webinar. We hope you're keeping well and managing to stay dry with all the rainfall we've had over the last number of days. Today we'll be discussing minding our traditional farm heritage with particular focus on strategies for hedgerow management. Today we're joined by Meadhbh Bolger, who is Biodiversity Officer with the Heritage Council, Dr. Keena, who's Countryside Management Specialist with Teagasc, and Mícheál Kelly, who's Scheme Support Specialist with Teagasc. So we have an action-packed morning for you. We have presentations and we have videos, and we're going to get straight into it. Maeve, you have a slideshow you're going to share with us, and then we're going to hear from Catherine, and we're going to give you the opportunity then to put questions to all of our speakers this morning. Mícheál is going to help us out with the questions later on, so do use that opportunity to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So Maeve, if you're free to share there, we can...
Yes. Hi, thank you very much. Hi everyone, morning. Thanks for having me on speaking. I always enjoy watching in on the Signpost Series webinar, so it's great to be speaking on one. I've been working, like Mark said, as Biodiversity Officer with the Heritage Council. I've been working there since last November. I'm also living on a dairy farm in Laois myself, my partner's dairy farm, and I'm in the middle of doing the Green Cert down in Kildalton, so with Teagasc. I'll speak a bit about Hedgerow Week, kind of at the beginning and the end of the presentation today. I'll talk a bit about the value of hedgerows from a natural heritage point of view, especially. I'll touch on a case study from County Offaly on the hedgerow survey that we've funded, and I'll speak a little bit about our local authority biodiversity officer programme. So just very briefly, in case some of you don't know, the Heritage Council, we're a statutory agency since 1995. We work across the broad spectrum of heritage, built, natural and cultural heritage. The work we do ranges from proposing policy, providing advice to government. We give a lot of grants. We have lots of projects, partnerships, collaborations with many different organisations. We also run local authority heritage programmes, including the Heritage Officer Network. So that's been running for a long time. And since a couple of years now, the Biodiversity Officer Network, which, as I said, I'll speak a bit more about later. We originally set up the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and they're their own company now, but with oversight still from us. So lots of you will know them. A little bit about Hedgerow Week, the history of it. It's a partnership between ourselves and Teagasc. It's been running in partnership for 3 years now. And I know Catherine might mention a bit more later. Teagasc were running it themselves for the past 6 years before we joined 3 years ago. It's aiming to raise awareness on the importance of hedges for agriculture, biodiversity and climate. And there's lots of events like this one online and many in person, which I will speak a little bit about later. So on hedges themselves, we know that hedges, scrub and non-forest trees, they cover about 6.9% of the Republic of Ireland, but that's very much an estimation. Studies vary. Some studies say up to 12%, and an estimated almost 700,000 kilometres. And as many people know, our own native woodland and forest cover is only at about 2%. So hedgerows are a really vital part of our landscape in this sense for biodiversity, climate and more. And some of them are even thought to be the remnants of our ancient woodlands. They're very deeply rooted in our past in this sense and confer a sense of character to the landscape. The majority of hedgerows we do see now were established in the mid-18th century for agricultural land delineation, stock control, shade, shelter, etc. But there is many even older, and some we know even dating back to Neolithic and Bronze Ages. In terms of a bit more on the value of hedges, we know they provide food and shelter they provide flowers and fruit for birds, bats, bees, lots of other insects. They provide a nesting site for birds, a hibernation site for other wildlife. They connect habitats, so they act as wildlife corridors, pathways for which wildlife can travel through the landscape. And that's why it's really important that they link up with other ecosystems well. For example, bats use hedgerows as navigational aids to find their way between roosts and their feeding grounds. Water quality and flood control are really important elements. Hedgerows act as overland barriers to the flow of water, so they trap nutrients and sediments that we don't want to end up in our watercourses. They also slow down the flow, so helping with flood control. There's been a few studies done, or several studies done, on the carbon sequestration of hedges. The kind of main one that would be quoted is the EPA one in 2014 that was done, that found that hedgerow and non-forest woodlands have the potential to sequester between 0.66 and 3.3 tonnes of CO2 per hectare per year. So it is a really important carbon store, and I think there definitely could be more research done in this area. We know that a newly planted hedge is much less beneficial than an older hedge, so that's the really importance of great planting new hedges, but really important not to rip up the ones that are already there if possible. An older hedge is more likely to have an excellent existing root system, soil structure, microorganisms. It supports already a range of wildlife, so this would take a long time to establish with a new hedge. We also know that up to 2,000 kilometres, research shows, is being removed annually of hedgerows, which is not great. Catherine will speak, as I know, in her presentation a bit more on the management and what kind of hedges we're aiming for. But we know research shows that taller, wider, denser hedges are better for carbon storage, for biodiversity, for shelter, shade and flood control. And with annual cutting, it is important to say annual cutting, the hedge won't flower or fruit in a way that we want for wildlife. So really the aim is for a different range of types of hedges according to your needs, abilities and the species of hedges you have. And as I said, Catherine will talk more about that. I wanted to touch on this hedgerow appraisal system. So we developed this, we funded this. It was developed by, you can see the cover of it on the screen there. It was a methodology that was developed in 2006. And it's been used since then, or since even before then. It was kind of in development for several years and being used. And since then, there's been about, I think, more than 18 counties have had hedgerow surveys done using this methodology. And some have had them done twice, which is great because there's comparison figures there. It's basically the county is split into 1 kilometre grid squares, and about 10 hedgerows are surveyed in those squares, in each square. So it's kind of at random, but it does give a good picture across the county overall. And the methodology looks at the things like the structure of the hedge, the species diversity, the floristic data, and the habitat connectivity and other things as well. I wanted to touch on the findings from one recent survey, which was Offaly. It was done last year. It was also done before that in 2005, so there's comparison figures there. It was done last year by Flynn Fernie Environmental Consultants, Claudia Pascali, so I'd like to thank her actually for giving me, I think that the study isn't published fully yet, so these are kind of the preliminary findings. And it was done for Offaly County Council, the Biodiversity Officer, Ricky Whelan there. Some of their findings I'll touch on because I think they're very interesting and they're likely quite similar across other counties in terms of the state of hedgerows. And of course, these are the hedgerows at random, so some of them are on agricultural land, others are on public land, etc. They found that 53% of hedgerows were species rich, which is actually higher than many other counties that they have surveyed. So species rich refers to 4+ or more native species in that hedgerow. 15% of the tree species, that was the shrub species, 15% of the tree species are healthy, and healthy, of course, varies depending on what you're looking at. But for them, it was kind of the presence of injuries or diseases, the growth rate, the soil health, the diversity of native species that the tree species support. So yeah, that's quite a low figure. And there's a decline they saw in oak and an increase in hazel since 2005. And ash, they're seeing, is being replaced by sycamore, which we know sycamore isn't a native Irish tree, and it does support less biodiversity than ash would. Some other findings: the ground flora. So there's a low diversity of ground flora species, and the likely reasons for this they found are the size of the margins beside the hedgerow, nutrient enrichment, and herbicide use. And finally, another interesting finding is on the structure. So only 19% were considered complete. So complete is a measure of the gappiness in the hedge. So this they found had a big negative impact on wildlife. and there's definitely opportunities there for planting in the gaps. Overall, so this is their overall findings is kind of the main issues were nutrient enrichment, the margin width, and management. So these are the research recommendations that they recommend on: increasing the margin at the base of the hedge, keeping fertilizers and sprays well away from both this margin and, of course, the hedge itself, as I think most people hopefully do practice. The hedge being cut and maintained at a minimum of 1.5 metres and incrementally increased. So it's very important not to cut at the exact same point every year. I think Catherine will talk more through that. An A-shaped profile is often best if possible, with the bushy top of the bushy top if the hedge is tall and overgrown, depending on what kind of hedge you're going for. And identifying gaps in the hedgerow, replanting where appropriate, and then rejuvenating by coppicing, pollardine, lane. I won't go too much into them. And as I said, Catherine will talk more through about the cutting frequency and how things can be done. So I'll touch a little bit on the policy and legislation. We know the Wildlife Act 2000 governs the timings of the cutting, so that will open up again in a few days, and then between end of March and end of August, there is no cutting allowed to protect the wildlife in the hedges. However, we do know there's many exemptions to this, and unfortunately there's nothing on the quality or management of hedgerows in the Wildlife Act. It's just on the timing of cutting. The EIA Environmental Impact Assessment, agriculture regulations, also they govern around, as you know, how much hedgerow is possible to remove, what requires screening and so on agricultural land. We do need, from our point of view, we do need more clear. It is kind of fragmented across many different legislation schemes, the exemptions, so definitely clearer and more robust legislation and guidelines are needed on hedgerows in Ireland. And just to say, it would be great to have something in there in the policy side on the quality and management of hedges. So it could be policies in the next CAP could incentivise the quality of hedges, not just how much can be removed or planted and so on. So I will say a little bit about our local authority biodiversity officer programme. We set this up 2 years ago, and there's a biodiversity officer in place in almost all local authorities now. South Dublin and Cork County are going to start. They're starting in the next few months, from what I know. So it's brilliant. We have them in almost all. Some counties have more than one biodiversity officer. Fingal, they're well established now. I think they have 6 biodiversity officers in Fingal County Council. So they enable kind of the integration of ecology and policy into practice on the ground. They work across so many different areas. They're doing brilliant work. One of the key things they're doing at the moment when they come in is starting their biodiversity action plans. So these are strategic plans guided by ourselves. We have guidance. We kind of work with them through the process, and the hope is these action plans will really also be embedded kind of in the county development plans, so have a strong say at the local authority level. They, of course, work on hedgerows. This is just an example of the kind of work they do around hedgerows. They do the surveys, like I mentioned, the Offaly one. Some of them were preparing county council tree and hedgerow management plans. A lot of them are mapping hedgerows on zoned lands. Many of them are, or all of them, we hope, would be integrating positive hedgerow management into all areas of the council. So especially roads and housing would be big areas where that would need more work on the quality of hedgerows. Okay, I think I'm nearly there. They're organising, this is just to touch on the many events that they are organising for Hedgerow Week. Online this afternoon is Limerick County Council Biodiversity Officer Sinead has organised for MPWS. I think Anya, her second name's gone out of my head now. It's on, the link is there. I'll put it in the chat as well afterwards. But she'll touch a lot on the policy and legislation side of hedgerows. So if you want to learn more about that, do join the lunchtime webinar. And then there's lots of in-person events in Offaly, Meadh, Laois and Kilkenny. So they're around for hedgerow walks, foraging walks, bat walks. There's a hedge lane demonstration actually in Offaly if anyone's interested in that. That's it. Thank you very much. And yeah, looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations and the discussion.
Thank you for that, and really interesting there. 18th century. Hadn't realised that it was as recent as that. Really, relatively
Mm.
recently. So Catherine, you've got to talk to us more on the management side of things, and I know you have a video to share with us as well towards the end of your presentation.
Thank you, Mark. So this year, we're really focusing on hedge cutting. So that involves both farmers and contractors. And our message is for everybody to think before cutting hedges this autumn. And we're focusing on kind of a whole farm strategy, get people to think what they want the farm hedges to look like in 5 or 10 years' time. So why do we need a whole farm strategy? May have mentioned CAP there, and we don't know what's coming in the next round. But in general, in agri-environment, we're moving from rule-based to results-based in agri-environment schemes. And whether we're paid that way or not, it makes sense. So results from a hedgerow point of view means quantity and quality. Both are really important. We need a whole farm strategy because we're very conscious of the promotion of our hedges in our green credentials for our Irish food for marketing purposes. We want to reverse the decline in biodiversity. And farmers have a huge pride in hedges, and people in the countryside do. But there is confusion. And the one point I would make is that the summer appearance masks decline. And that follows on from the Offaly survey there. So look, we know biodiversity is in decline. 1 million plant and animal species threatened with extinction, more so over the past 50 years. From the EPA State of the Environment report, the protected habitats, a lot of them are in unfavourable condition. We know the breeding birds are in decline and the overwintering birds. Now, none of those specifically probably refer to hedges. The hedge is the common habitat, and that, in one sense, makes it vulnerable, and I think it can be gone before we realise it. So I think our focus is to how important the most common habitat is and the most available to everybody, and how marvellous it is. The future, there's no doubt that the targets are already in the National Biodiversity Plan, the Wildlife Act, the EU Biodiversity Strategy. Industry is a huge interest in biodiversity and in marketing, as I said. And we know the nature for the future, the nature restoration law, and there will be a plan there by September of next year with targets and reporting. So I think on especially on all farms, hedges are probably they are the most common habitat, because they're probably on every farm except maybe some very, very upland farms, upland only. And my first point is for us to assess the structure only in December and February. Everything looks good in the summer, and I've learned that a long time ago to my detriment, bringing a group of people out to show them how bad the hedge was, and it looks super in the summer. So that's just, please remember that. Only look at the structure when the hedge is bare, and you will really see it. So as I said, on farms, and especially on our improved grassland farms, the hedges are probably the most common habitat, the most important habitat. So again, this comes back to my point on quantity, and sometimes it gets lost when we talk about hedge cutting management, instructions. So just to be very conscious of the fact that farmers have the farm that has hedges, as Meadhbh also said, and I know Loretta Guinan said it a few years ago, and I quote her ever since, the best, when asked what hedge is the best hedge is the one you have, no matter how bad it is. And, again, the farmer with lots of hedges automatically has lots of has potential to have a lot more flowers and fruit, and possibly has potential to have a lot of different management, and still come out with better results than, let's say, the number A there, the grassland prairie farming. It's kind of pointless talking about how to manage the hedges when there is only a boundary hedge around a 100-acre field. So then my next point is, yes, and I think the last slide there kind of highlighted the linear habitats. And when I talk linear habitats, the hedges, field margins and watercourses, and I've done a lot of work on this through my own research, and they're incredibly important, far more important by area than like an acre of woodland. Old woodland, which is super, is even more valuable if that acre is spread out in hedges because of T-junctions. The average field size is a metric that we've come up with, and we're using it in advisory work. It's very, very powerful. It not only takes account of the length, but it also takes account of junctions and, you know, the intersections. So a smaller average field size allows birds, moths, and other flying insects to use field boundaries as corridors of movement. The connectivity is really, really important, and the average field size makes it takes that into account. So let's say, for example, you can all do the figure here yourself, any of you who have land or know of a farm. If the average field size, if I have a farm of 100 hectares and I have one big field or two big fields, and if you have a farm of 100 hectares and you have 10 fields, you know, it goes without saying how much biodiversity is already there. And we are, when I talk about average field size in the biodiversity sphere, we are talking about a field completely surrounded by biodiverse boundaries. And my own study, I think this highlights the issue, the average field size. Now, we're never talking about an individual field, because I love diversity is the key for biodiversity. So large fields are fine. We're not trying to restrict the size of field, but the field, the farming platform overall, it is really important that the average is reasonable, and the average of about 5 hectares. But the range, just think of this, the range is from 1.1 hectare up to 37 hectares. So the 37 hectare is the 100 acre field I talked about a moment ago. That would be the average on the farm. So obviously the potential to do more there. So the aim is for less than 5 hectares, or at least think about how you can improve it. So that's not so much comes into hedge management, but I think it needs to be taken into consideration before, when you're talking to a farmer about how to manage the hedges. And, you know, the overall farm picture must come into it. So coming down then to the management, we know every hedge is absolutely different. A whole range there, pictures on the top, completely different. And it goes without saying that each hedge can be managed appropriately in many different ways. So that's not to take from, so our whole farm strategy is not to take from that point. So, but from management, from a farm point of view, we have differentiated them into two types: topped and not topped. So the topped hedge is a managed hedge. That's another word for it. The hedge that isn't topped was never topped, or maybe it's a new hedge that's going to be allowed grow into a tree line hedge. We used to call these escaped. It kind of had a negative connotation at a workshops that we did. So the hedge is escaping into a tree line hedge, and I think over the years, it was always there, the types of hedges we had, but perhaps we haven't focused enough on the tree line hedge as its value, and how, you know, to give the farmers the confidence to use it, to be proud of it. And the whole key to management is that whitethorn, the same as an oak tree, when you plant your 2-year-old bare-rooted whip, it wants to grow into being a single stem tree with a canopy full of flowers and haws in this case. Absolutely full of flowers and haws, as you can see there, once you get to a mature tree. So whereas the topped and managed hedges are a man-made habitat, but I suppose what one of our strategies is to get that tree back into those topped and managed hedges. And obviously the tree line hedges are full of those. Okay. So the biodiversity value of the tree line hedge is primarily in the canopy. You can see from the previous tree there, full of flowers and fruit and associated then fauna. There are certain birds, goldfinch and chaffinch, that actually nest up in the kind of the tree above the canopy of the tree, rather than in the base of a hedge. Every bird, all the birds that nest in hedges, they have a different niche. Just to highlight again the variation in hedge management, the two types of hedges. This comes from the Breyer report. Our own Stuart Green was involved in this. But again, the words that's used in this report is managed and unmanaged, but you can kind of align them to being topped and tree line hedges. And it just shows the more of the topped hedges in parts of the country, and in other parts of the country there's a lot more of tree line hedges. And then the stone walls is the third picture there. So I think we need to be very careful about giving a one size fits all. So the strategy is trying to kind of give two types, and within that then lots of things can be done. So the tree line hedges in this project that are called unmanaged are at high risk of being cutting down. And again, all the surveys are showing that while I know Meadhbh showed a figure there of a huge amount being removed, in agriculture now it's not possible to remove hedges unless on very, very strict safety grounds. Now, there's still a lot of houses and other developments remove hedges, but hopefully there's less in the agriculture world. But what the huge danger is now, when somebody takes over a hedge, rather than taking it out, they will chop down that beautiful tree line hedge to the butt, and it can be death by 1,000 cuts. And just a very key fact there, that of the 689,000 kilometres of hedge that this report found, only 26% are internal. So I think our tree line hedges, we have more of them because of the land structure in Ireland, that not everybody has a 100-acre field. They're likely to have a couple of blocks with lots of external boundaries. So the external boundaries are obviously less at risk of being removed, and should be less at risk of being even the height reduced in them. So the aim, a challenge to farmers now is to aim for at least 50% tree line hedges. And a lot of farmers, as I said, have those already on the boundary. And we do say at least, because if you take over a farm that's full of tree line hedges, these are so incredibly valuable. They're there the 200 years, as we spoke about, and are not easily replaced. So while they can be rejuvenated, and we have a hedge laying demonstration in Kildalton by Owen Donnelly next Thursday, I love hedge laying done right, but I really worry about it not being done right. So and there's not, I don't think we're ever going to have a huge amount of hedge laying. So in general, we leave these hedges alone, never, ever, ever to top them. Cutting overhanging branches, again we'll demonstrate in Kildalton, absolutely if needed, but the hedge doesn't need it. I think that's a key point. We'd have always kind of flown to say, of course, hedges have to be cut because farmers have to farm, but the hedge doesn't need to be cut, the tree line hedge. You cut overhanging branches if there's a roadway beside it, or if need be for machinery, and if it's not possible to have a grass margin, which would be the ideal situation there. And again, the first thing that's thrown at you at a meeting when you're talking about this is, if you don't cut that hedge, it'll come out into the field. Well, that hedge will not jump out from the top. It will creep out underneath if the field isn't grazed or cut. So if, there's lots of these hedges in the country. And again, I'm thinking of Cavan and lots of the places where we saw on the map there, these beautiful hedges that are never cut. So we just need to be very careful about saying all hedges do not need to be cut. And I think it's something that will come up in the video later by the advisors there, saying that that's the first thing farmers think, I have to, for derogation, for acres, they do not have to be cut. That's the first point. So today we're really, I suppose, celebrating these tree line hedges, ideally the grass margin beside them. And as I said, the biggest threat to them is them being turned into stumpy upside down tile brush hedges, which this picture here tells it all. And again, even these pictures will look good in the summer when the grass vegetation grows up to its 18, 2 foot high, and there's some vegetation on that, but you can see there, and you can see sometimes them hedges are the greenest in winter because they're covered in ivy. Now, ivy is good, but this is ivy and briars are not the problem. The problem is the hedge, and then they cause a problem. So this is what we really, we don't want. No good for carbon, no good for biodiversity. And this is still an issue with new hedges that people do not understand, and they're muddling up the two types of hedges. And if they want a topped hedge, only coming in and cutting it when it reaches the wire, and then if you keep cutting it, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It may take quite a few years. A lot of people say, I did something and the hedge survived. Whitethorn hedges survive despite what we do to them, and as I said, it can be, you can see roadside hedges, stumpy ones like that, and gaps appearing. So eventually they're killed.
So, Catherine, could I ask just to go, if you went back to that last slide, what sort of management strategy would you recommend in that situation?
Good point. So one possibility is laying isn't an issue there, isn't an option there. One possibility is to coppice, so cut it back at the base. The one on the bottom, the one on the top is almost gone too far. But we don't want that done widespread either, although they are the hedges that should be picked for coppicing rather than the tree line hedges. The other option, and this is where we're coming into our 50% hedges allowed grow, just leave it off. Leave it off into a tree line hedge. It will never be stock proof, but that's not always an issue. So 2 points. Decide, do you want it to be a topped hedge with a dense base, or decide, can you let it go into a tree line hedge? Okay, it might be a bit funny shaped compared to a tree line hedge starting from scratch, but so what? The birds and bees won't mind. So 2 options there. If you're short on tree line hedges, just let them hedges grow up. And as I said, side trim if need be. And they will still have, as long as a hedge is gaining in height, width, or density, it's sequestering carbon.
And imagine if you had a lot of those hedges, you'd want to really do it on a phased basis.
Absolutely. That's why I'd be terrified of saying go and get the circular saw and cut that. But do it on a phased basis, as you say. Letting them grow up would be easy. In fact, you just let them grow for a few years anyway, even if you are going to go cutting them. The point there is, why cut stumps? That is and the sad part is they're a lot more common than we think, and you only see those in November, December, or December, January, during the dormant season. So this is our good topped hedge. That tree is an occasional tree there. So that the dense hedge, as wide and as tall as possible. The biodiversity is primarily in the base there. And if they're cut annually, which can be very good for the hedge, we must provide for flowers and fruit elsewhere. So one of the ways of doing that is letting the tree grow up within the hedge, a flowering tree, the whitethorn primarily, and having, as I said, the whole farm strategy then is saying half the hedges, tree line hedges, full of flowers and fruit, the topped hedges, we are not depending on the body of the hedge to provide the flowers and fruit, but we can have some flowers and fruit in that. Whereas this is what we don't want. No flowers for bees, no fruit for birds, bad for carbon, not very nice looking either for the landscape, but that is unfortunately kind of what people think is the right thing. So we need to move away from that and keep showing the good pictures. This is a good topped hedge, a dense base suited to nesting birds. It's allowed to grow as tall and as wide as possible, triangular profile. The bulkier, the better, as much as the farmer will allow you to come into the field. The apical dominance in the topped hedge must be managed, so it must be cut, must be topped to prevent it escaping into the tree line hedge. And light incremental trimming results in dense growth and healthy hedges. The other big danger to the hedges is rough cuts, and we'll be focusing on that very much next Thursday. So little and often in the whole, but it's the whole farm strategy is what I stress is what we're after here. the incremental cutting again, wherever you cut the whitethorn, as you can see in the upside down tolish bush hedge, wherever you cut it, that's where the growth, it multiplies at that point. And if you keep coming back cutting below where the growth was, you will die. You just wear it out. Whereas if you're incrementally cutting it, leaving it multiply every year, that's absolutely increasing in density, in carbon and everything. So when cut, the new shoots come from directly below it. I don't know time. Yeah. So the other are absolute, and farmers have really engaged with this where they've seen it. And we had a fantastic walk at Daring at dusk on a farmer who will be over with us in Kildalton during the week, the Walsh farm, and they could. The farmers really kind of got it that everyone says their hedges are great, but the body of the hedge will not have fruit and flowers if it's cut annually. And one option is to leave that clump. Now, so if every farmer and every contractor left one clump in every hedge this autumn, that's what we are asking people to do. And within a few years, now it does take a few years because the flowers and fruit only grow, on stronger, but, that's about 5 years left in Kildalton there. In 10, 15, 20 years, we'll have a tree as big as the one we saw earlier in the middle of the field. They are perching posts as well, and the number of pictures I see as I walk down the field and I see the birds, they don't sit on the top of a flat hedge. You don't see them. Now people say, why only one clump? Well, one clump to get people into it, but equally I want the clumps at different stages. I don't want every farmer in the country leaving, 5 clumps this year and none anymore. So different heights, again, causes diversity. Different growth stages, you will have different biodiversity within it. So if we could get that into our hedge cutting, topping hedges, leaving occasional ones, that's even within an existing hedge. That hedge there has been cut for the last 50 years, flat across the top until 5 years ago. So that's what we're asking people to do. We're not talking about planting new ones. We're talking about leaving a clump grow up. So the whole farm strategy is a focus on all biodiversity, all the birds, the flora and fauna in the hedges. And so again, just to reiterate what we want, the 2 simple things we want immediately this autumn is to leave one clump or bunch of thorn saplings to grow in every topped hedge, and to retain or allow, depending on what you have already, half of your hedges escape into tree line hedges. And that's the picture that I would love to see on the farming platform of every farm. And you can see the margins are in there as well. So again, hedge cutting for contractors and farmers, because we need, Francis Quigley keeps talking about, they need to talk to each other. Both need to know. So please, anybody who's cutting hedges, come to Kildalton next Thursday the 4th at 11 o'clock. And again, we'll be talking a lot more maybe about the cutting those. Well, both hedges, as I said, may be cut, both the tree line may be side trimmed and the other one has to be cut. We will be demonstrating both in Kildalton. But just for today, we want to highlight particularly the tree line hedge, some of which are never cut. And two absolute advocates who have influenced me, the Bride Report and Donald Sheehan, has absolutely focused that I have not talked enough about these hedges. And the Bride Report, which is now available online for everybody to read, fantastic. Just 2 little quotes there. Too much focus on having a dense hedge, and cutting every 3 years will still mean very little blossom and berries. So, and then we're just now going to show a video clip, which Mícheál Kelly, who's here with us today on the questions, facilitated in County Cavan with Kevin Daly and the Teagasc advisors, and there's some very, very good messages in this.
Hello, I'm Niall McCabe. I'm a Teagasc advisor here in Cavan, a dry stock advisor, and I'm on the farm with Kevin Daly here, and we're joined with Shauna Cooney, the local Teagasc acres and irrigation advisor also. So tell us, Shauna, you're doing acres farm walks here in Cavan. There's a lot of particular requirements in acres to do with managing hedgerows. Could you briefly outline what's the requirements in acres?
Yeah, so one of the requirements is you have to have your hedges at least 1.8 metres. it's a mandatory requirement for your areas-based actions. But then it also benefits you as a CP farmer because you're scored on your external boundaries or the boundary of the field. So Kevin, which the farm we're in here today, he scored very well on all his boundaries because he has, as you see behind me here, nice tall hedgerows and tree lines, so they're meeting the minimum of 1.8 metres and they're good and thick. From a scheme point of view, you think you have to cut your hedges, whether it be you're on acres or in derogation. In a matter of fact, you don't have to cut your hedges. You can keep them intact, you can let them grow up, so you can. The only hedges you ever have to cut is roadside for safety.
We come out to Kevin to take a look at hedges. He has a lot of work done on hedgerow and hedgerow management and maintenance around the farm, so there's quite a bit to see and quite a bit to learn as well, Kevin. There's a place looking well.
Just keep it simple, that's the goal here. Most of the hedges here are mature hedgerows. Over the years, under different rep schemes in the late 90s, a few hedges were coppiced and to taking them up at the time and made a fantastic job. And I suppose other hedges are left grow as natural and keep the trees in the hedges, never touch the trees. And if it's new saplings, let them grow as much as possible. And just a matter of keeping the facing in the hedge every so often, just to keep encroaching bramble from getting out too far, mainly, that's all. But it doesn't interfere with the course of farming, and where there's any dry drains or that, there's a fence line along the hedges, and that's protecting the hedgerows, so in most cases, so it's easy enough to take management of it, and it works here well, and I'm happy to have it, and the cows are happy because they have shelter lines in the farm. It breaks the flow of wind through the farm as well. I think people that's lost out there, because if you have an open 10-acre field and not a hedge kind, and if it's a wet day, you see the cows standing on up and looking where's the roof, So that's it. To me, that's is keep it easy, keep it simple and easy. That's it. Quite an abundance of hazelnut here. In most hedges is hazelnuts, and some hedges is complete hazelnuts, and then I have a couple of hedges with just nothing but white thorn and black thorn, which people might be familiar with. That's the black thorn is the slow bush, and a few elderberries scattered throughout it, and then we have a bit of alder or as you call it, the sally trees, and then a few other mature trees, ashes and sycamores and oak trees on some of the hedges, So it's a mixture of everything, and there's a bit of quinns in the hedges, and leave them alone because it provides a bit of nectar for insects there in the spring when they're flowering, and you see them all. And also have honeysuckles there growing through the hedges, and lots of bramble and lots of blackberry. And blackberry is very nice to see because I think it adds a bit of colour to the hedge, And this year in particular, it's fantastic to see, So.
And what encouraged you to change your practice with the hedges? Did you
I always let them. I didn't really change much. Even on the reps, it was a 5-year plan, the 5-year rule, I went by. You did a section, then lead them. And then you wouldn't touch them again, You only matter of facing them in, and the rest were left. Some of them were just left grow, So most of them was just facial management, not letting them out too much, but always have shelter.
You're not worried with the hedges coming out?
No, but the hedges won't come out. If you're grazing the field well and you're cutting their top, and you're not going to have them out anyway. So, and most hedges is a metre and a half, maybe 2 metres boundary in some of them there from the centre of a hedge, I call it, And that's in all cases nearly there, so it doesn't bother me. Because in a year like this, in a dry year, you won't have any grass in those metre and a half anyway, so because the hedge takes from it anyway, so you're not losing any forage area. So even in the citrus crown, it's the same principle.
Every farmer's hedge is really on the farm that don't have to be cut, that would be better off to grow up. There's trees in them, they're tree-line hedges, and it'd be better management to let them grow and let them up and let them blossom and come into flower and fruit and seeds. It's much better for the wildlife. It doesn't have to be every hedge on the farm. It can be, some of the hedges. If you walk your hedges and look at them, you'll definitely see, I'd say at least 50% or more that would actually suit to be let grown up and not cut or trimmed. It's probably a habit with a lot of people to cut and trim hedges just to keep them tidy, and it doesn't need to be done.
Speaking as a farmer, as we're all told, probably back in the reps day, there was a plan in place that you had to cut hedges every 3 and 4 or 5 years in rotation and keep them cut. And I think that got into the mindset of a lot of people. after that and still thinking, we should do that. But I got away from that, and I think we should very happy to have trees in your tree line and keep them growing there. And I have no issue. I'm on a dairy farm here, and it's not interfering with my daily farming methods. And all my tree hedges are in that state of play. All I do is facing them and to keep the tree lines, and there's a good white thorn, let them grow up into a tree, which I'm doing, and haze is the same there. So I have no issues, but I think it's just down to pure habit that people are told back in the day in the 90s, so you have to keep them trimmed and cut, and it's just getting away from that, and it's no big issue. I suppose cost of cutting the hedges is not a big thing, but still it's unnecessary unless you have to do it. Even on the cow passes here, half of the cows for walkways, they're faced every 3 years, just faced every 3 years to keep them free of brambles mainly coming in, because just for tractors and machinery, and keep a clear line, that's all. You're not cutting the trees down, you're letting them grow up, and as you can see, they're all growing up, so, and you still have a thick hedge.
It is. It's one of the fears people have about letting hedges grow up, is that they're going to take over the hedge or take over the field and come out and spread out through their fields. But as Kevin is saying, if you manage the field and keep it grazed, keep it topped, you won't have that here. So tell us, Kevin, looking around here, of all your fields that are surrounded by hedgerows, what would the average field size be?
4 acres.
4 acres.
That would be a bit...
and that includes your Citrus?
Including Citrus ground and all grazing ground, averaged out, yeah.
Okay. Kevin, have you noticed wildlife, bird life, anything benefiting?
Of course you have. You only have to be here in the months from the end of March until, let's say, the middle of June. Every morning it's like a choir every day.
Lovely.
And it was a choir. It never was non-stop, because you had the habitats for them. Blackbirds, thrushes, wrens, robins, you name it. Even the sparrowhawk is about here. And it's all because of the hedgerows, like, you know. And I suppose
the habitat is there.
The habitat's there. It's natural habitat there. It's there, like, you know.
So that's a lot of fruit and flowers for wildlife and birds and mammals. And insects. Yeah. So it's very positive. As an advisor, I'd be very happy to encourage farmers to do what Kevin's doing here and grow more tree line hedges. There's a great trade-off, a great benefit to wildlife, and it looks very well. It's very positive. I think most hedges in the country are native white thorn, black thorns, all trees that will grow up if they're just left alone. And maybe if we learn that not cutting them, not going near them is proper management, and it will develop a tree line hedge for you in time.
That's a really lovely piece there, and beautiful part of the country, and I can tell the cows are happy with all the shelter that they have around them there, so fair play, Mícheál. That's a well beautifully shot piece there, and it's always good to get out onto the farm and see what's actually happening, and obviously that farmer was very tuned into his local surroundings, and you know, talking about the facing, you know, just to keep it at a manageable, not allowing encroachment onto the farm roadways and so on. So we're moving towards the end of the session today. So we do have time for questions. A lot of questions coming through from our audience this morning, Mícheál. Maybe if you would like to, I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get through all of them, but we'll try and keep the responses as concise as possible.
Catherine, I suppose, there's a number of questions coming in here on hedgerow management. One that came in here: if a hedgerow was pruned for the first couple of years and has a thick base, would side trimming alone suffice to maintain the hedge? And alternatively, if a hedge was sown and not pruned from the start, but is now cut regularly, I suppose is heading towards that upside down toilet brush hedge you mentioned, what's the best solution for the sparse base? Or how often should hedges be topped? Or how much?
Okay, so I suppose once you understand that wherever you cut them, they'll multiply. So if ideally you inch that up, now inch is the wrong word because it goes mad and the other ones come out. It's Mícheál, what you say is the suckler cow with the number of calves, and if you wean the strong calf, the others will do better. So it's always pruning the leader is the ideal. But if you're, at a certain point, but it's very easy when you bring in the flail after 3 or 4 or 5 years, managing them, to bring the flail back down again and let it come up. Incremental cutting is always the best if you're talking about density and once you've started the process. Because my original start, where I only pruned it once, now that hedge is now 4 wavy trees. It's where you have... So ideally, just think yourself. I think if people just thought about it, they'd know exactly where to cut.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a couple of Kevin alluded to it there in his video about the tradition of hedge cutting, and Shauna mentioned, will say in the video, that farmers think they have to do it for a scheme, where in actual fact they don't. I suppose for both Maeve and Catherine, do you think there's work to be done there on promotion and education of practice change, because this has become accepted practice?
I think so. I'll let Maeve go in a minute. But now, I think this is where I want both types, Mícheál. I don't want people to go away thinking I want all. If a farmer wants all tree-line hedges, that's absolutely fantastic. But there's a benefit in having the two types, and we'll focus more on the other one next week. But definitely there's education. I will never talk about hedge cutting without talking about which hedge. We should never show a picture of one hedge without the other. And both are good done right.
And Maeve, I suppose in your presentation there, you mentioned that, and Catherine mentioned it in her presentation as well, in fact, that always maintaining an older hedge is better than planting a new one. We'll say for someone that plants a new hedge, how long, like in terms of years, how long would it be roughly before that has the same biodiversity value as something that's removed?
No, I don't think you can put an exact figure on that. It's, yeah. I mean, like I said at the beginning, most of our hedges have been around since the mid 18th century or longer. So you could say that long for if it's removing one of those hedges. So it's or if the hedge you only planted 10 years ago, then it's different. So yeah, there's not really a figure, but many years. So really think twice before. And I think some of the questions we're also touching is on the hedge removal and so on. But just to say, it's not. Hedge removal, a lot of it is being done by public like for housing, for development. It's not, this figures on hedge removal isn't farmers on agricultural land. A lot has been done for development. So just to note that.
I think it was interesting there in the presentation as well. Catherine had that of our 689,000 kilometres of hedgerow, only 26% are internal hedges on land. There was a question there, Maeve, on the hedgerow surveys. Are they available? I'm just trying to pull it up here. Are they available to the public?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So the individual reports that have been done over the years, they should be available on the County Council websites. Now, I don't have a succinct list of which have been done, but if you're interested in, just go onto your County Council website, Google it, hedgerow survey, whatever county. If you can't find it, do contact my email. You can find on the Heritage Council website. We have all the reports. They're all publicly, none of them are privately held. We are, ideally, the data would be available in one place. So we're kind of working on that. We funded most of them over the years. So we're working on gathering all the data in one place and have kind of collating all the information in one place. But it's just taking a bit of time because some of them were done a long time ago. But yeah, if you want to find a report from your county, do have a search and come to me if you can't find it.
And I suppose, Catherine, there was a question here about, it just alluded to a lot of the ash trees along roads are dying, and there's another, what's best to use to replant, to replace those. And I suppose there was another question further down that asked, is there a list of native species available?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of planting into hedges. I would let nature take its course. And once animals aren't going through a hedge, the species will come themselves. If you are planting, stick to the smaller trees. If you were mentioning the road there, like the holly, I think you may have mentioned holly and blackthorn, and I'd be all for that. But sometimes just let nature take its course. A lot of those hedges are like linear woodlands. So a linear woodland, our woodland looks after itself. Where native trees are available, maybe Maeve can answer that. I meant to actually touch on that in my presentation. It is very important to source native trees
local provenance. You can, of course, buy hedgerow or hawthorns in from the Netherlands or mainland Europe, but there is a big risk comes with that of importing diseases that we don't have in Ireland, and they spread. Fire blight, a lot of people might know. So that's a really important point to make. I don't have a list of the nurseries. There's local nurseries in different counties. I don't know where there is. There a list of them somewhere, Catherine? Do you know?
Well, I think the question was more about the species, which is, I'm sure it's on all our websites in some format. Again, we could all probably do better. Actually, we've only about less than 20 native species. Irish provinces are much more difficult. I think you go and you ask for the cert with that, which is needed for all the schemes, the provenance cert.
And you might just mention there, Catherine, I'm just we're running short on time. Hedgerow Week, you have events coming up next week.
Well, the Teagasc on Thursday for anybody interested in hedge cutting. Maeve may want to highlight a few others.
Yeah, there's great. The ones I mentioned in my slides by the biodiversity officers around kind of the Midlands mainly. Just go onto our website. There's more details there, but there's great kind of bat and foraging and different walks. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, lots happening there. I see you have a hedge laying demonstration as well happening next Saturday week. And Sunday. So there's so much going on there. So do check out the Heritage Council website for a full list of all of the events that are taking place as part of National Hedgerow Week. So it's obviously the 1st of September is the opening of the hedgerow cutting season or trimming season. So it is a very, very appropriate time. We're right out of time, unfortunately. Thanks so much, Maeve, for joining us this morning, Catherine and Mícheál helping with questions. We've had a few inquiries there about the video that was played there, so we'll try and make sure we get that up on our YouTube channel. And of course, all of the previous and Signpost webinar series are available on our YouTube website and our channel and the podcast version as well. There was lots of imagery that you probably won't be able to capture on the podcast version today, but do tune in at any stage. So next week, we're going to be joined by Frances Quigley, who's going to be talking to us about better hedge cutting, and as it's another event as part of Hedgerow Week. So do join us next week for that. So until then, thanks a lot, and try and stay dry. You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.